Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the True North Report. My name is Andrew Lawton, broadcasting live across Facebook right now. I'm a fellow at the True North Initiative, and we're here on January 7th to talk about a big story in Canada that has been going on for a little over a year. And it has to do with one of the biggest issues that we face in 2019, and that is free speech, and specifically free speech on college and university campuses. So I'm going to talk a fair bit over the next little while about not just the Lindsay Shepherd case, but really the themes of this case that make it much bigger than Lindsay Shepherd. But there are so many different dimensions to this. I have to give a bit of the backstory here. And bear with me, and I know a lot of people have been following this, but it's such a profoundly, not unique example, but a profoundly, well, it's a good example, quite frankly, not because it's a positive case, but a good example at really instilling in everyone what people should already know about these, which is that campuses are not places for free speech. And that's been one of the biggest challenges here. So if you're just tuning in, I welcome you very much. I'm a fellow at the True North Initiative, and one of our big issues, and certainly one of my big issues, is preserving and protecting constitutional liberties across Canada. And that includes the right to free speech, not just because free speech is a good thing, but because free speech is an essential hallmark of a free society. Without speech, without debate, you lose your freedom. And when you bring that less in the macro sense of a society and more into context of just a campus or academia in general, without free speech, you have no free inquiry. Without free inquiry, you have no education. Without education, these universities cease to actually be anything other than institutions of indoctrination. And this is where the Lindsay Shepherd case really is so exceptional. So to go back to November of 2017, Lindsay Shepherd, who at the time was, I think, 20, 21, 22 years old, something like that, was doing what most students were. She was going to school, doing her thing. She was not a right-wing fire breather by any stretch, and she decided that she wanted to do something that shouldn't actually be an exceptional thing, and that is have all sides of a discussion represented. She was a teaching assistant. She was in an undergraduate class for which she was the TA, and she showed a clip from Television Ontario. So that's the Ontario equivalent of CBC, and the clip, as you know, was of a debate about gender pronouns. The clip featured Jordan Peterson, who had one particular perspective of this that is essentially that he doesn't believe in the fluidity of pronouns like some of the SJW leftists do. And which is fine. This is not even about what you believe in gender pronouns. But she shows this clip, gets hauled before this three-person panel, including her own professor, another professor from the department, and the school's gender violence manager, because showing a video clip is apparently an act of gender violence that requires a gender violence manager from the diversity and equity department, which is supposedly a department that has to exist. And this three-person panel, 45-minute meeting, she has the foresight to record what happened in the meeting, which most students wouldn't think of. And thank goodness Lindsay Shepherd did. She records that, and the rest, of course, is history. But where we are now is that this story is being litigated in the courtrooms. It's already been dealt with on the campus. It's already been dealt with in the court of public opinion. But now there are actually 3 legal cases going on in Canadian courtrooms to deal with what happened in that November 2017 meeting. And this is so complicated because of how convoluted this story is, but please do bear with me here. In that meeting, one of the ones who got it worst was obviously Lindsay Shepherd. She was the one being told that this was not a hate crime, but basically a hate crime. They didn't use those words, it's my word. They were telling her that it was creating toxicity in the classroom, that it was making it a harmful learning environment for young students. She was further to that being told that even though they weren't punishing her, that her educational career would be in jeopardy if she continued doing this type of thing. And what happened in that meeting was that to drive home the point to Lindsay that she was behaving in a way that they thought wrong, they went after Jordan Peterson, infamously comparing him to Adolf Hitler, said, no, if you are going to show a clip of Jordan Peterson, you can't do it in a neutral way. You have to criticize it. So they were actually telling her, you have to be anti-Jordan Peterson to have a place in this classroom discussion. So she's suing because this whole ordeal, she says, has made her unemployable in her chosen field, which is academia. She's suing Laurier and the three people in that meeting, Herbert Pimlott, Nathan Rambacana, who was her professor, and Adria Joel, who was the deputy assistant gender violence coordinator for offenses and grievances against mankind, or whatever it is. And she's suing them $3.5 million. And, a lot of people might think that she doesn't have a case. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but I do think that she was very clearly wronged. And this, $3.6 million case is really rooted in that this inquisition wronged her and was negligent in that it has now damaged her ability to work in academia. And if you hear some of the things that Lindsay's written and spoken about the way that she was treated after this whole thing happened, people not wanting to be in her class, professors being very uneasy about her, no one really talking to her. She was honestly shunned as an outcast after this, and this was all because of the school's doing. But what's interesting here is that Laurier apologized. The president of Laurier University apologized to Lindsay in a very public statement that said, this shouldn't have happened. We've listened to the audio, and yeah, we were wrong, you were right. And then Nathan Rambacana, Lindsay's professor, apologized to her directly. Now, this is key. He said he was not forced to, that he decided to, that he took it upon himself to apologize from himself. And in his apology, he also acknowledged that he was wrong to talk about Jordan Peterson the way he did. He said that he was wrong to compare him to Hitler. I'm going to read the exact quote from Nathan Rambacana. Not about the whole thing, but about the Jordan Peterson line in particular. I implied that Dr. Peterson is like Hitler, which is untrue and was never my intention. While I disagree strongly with many of Dr. Peterson's academic positions and actions, the tired analogy does him a disservice and was the opposite of useful in our discussion. So there's an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and more importantly, there is an acknowledgement that it shouldn't have happened and that he regrets it as part of an apology letter. And it literally, in the first line, says, I wanted to write to apologize to you. So Nathan Rambacana apologizes to Lindsay Shepherd for this meeting. And now we bring it to the current time, and Nathan Rambacana is actually suing Lindsay Shepherd over her recording of this meeting. But why this case is so interesting is that he's not just suing her outright. He is suing her as part of not her lawsuit against him, but suing her as part of Jordan Peterson's lawsuit against him and against Laurier and against Pimlott and Adria Joel. And this is a fascinating development because they're not countersuing, it sounds like, in Lindsay Shepherd's case against Laurier. They may in the future, they may be that I'm not aware of, but I haven't heard of anything. They're invoking Lindsay and trying to make her the responsible party in Jordan Peterson's lawsuit against them. And this is the epitome of trying to pass the buck. So Jordan Peterson's filing his own lawsuit, not as much as that of Lindsay Shepherd, but Jordan Peterson's lawsuit for $1.5 million, I believe, basically says that they've defamed him. He said that the 3 faculty members in the school itself defamed him in this meeting by comparing him to Hitler, by making him out to be a bigot, a transphobe, a racist, a this or that. They're defaming him. Now, their defense of this was at first, well, no, we didn't defame him. He hasn't suffered damages. His career is still going well, so, everything should be fine. But then there's another side of that, which is that, okay, but if we did defame him, it's not our fault. It's Lindsay Shepherd's fault because she's the one that recorded it. And I wrote a column about this that you can read at www.truenorthinitiative.com because you actually need to see it. I actually need to bring in like the big Glenbeck chalkboard and start drawing all the lines because this is just so bizarre and convoluted. But Jordan Peterson suing Laurier and the professors. Lindsay Shepherd is suing Laurier and the professors. As part of the Jordan Peterson case, the professors are suing Lindsay, saying that she's responsible for the defamation of Jordan that never happened, that Nathan Rambacana already apologized for. So I said in the column, are you dizzy yet? But in all honesty, they're saying that he wasn't defamed, but if he was, it wasn't their fault, it was Lindsay's. And even though they're saying it didn't happen, they already apologized for what was really the most egregious characterization in that Inquisition audio, and that was saying that Jordan Peterson is like Adolf Hitler. And there's that old Godwin's law that every online discussion will eventually, at some point, become about Hitler and World War II. What left-wing professors and most of the radical left right now, it doesn't even take more than one step to get there. It's not like, oh, you know, Jordan Peterson is like that guy, who's like that guy, who's like that guy, who's like Hitler. They go right to Hitler. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. They go right to Hitler. That is their number one and, frankly, their only toolkit when it comes to debating these issues. Anyone they disagree with in Hitler and other lessons from Laurier University. That is essentially what gets you a PhD from Laurier these days. You don't even need to defend your dissertation. You just say on the front page, this person's Hitler, and boom, before you know it, you're a professor. But this is actually quite offensive, not just to Peterson and Shepherd, but that they're trying to relitigate this after admitting they're wrong. It's offensive to everyone. It's offensive to everyone that they tried to tell they believed in free speech. It's offensive to anyone who's a graduate of Laurier, anyone who's ever going to get a fundraising letter from Laurier. And, you know, quite frankly, I look at this, I've looked at it from the beginning with a level of skepticism here because I didn't believe that Laurier was all that apologetic. And even when the letter came out a month after this blew up, apologizing to Lindsay Shepherd from Deborah McClatchy, the head of Laurier, I didn't buy into it. And when the school said we're going to, you know, have a bunch of introspection here and really delve into our commitment to free speech and whatever, because the commitment to free speech from Laurier, and a number of schools fall into this category, is littered with caveats of we believe in free speech, but we believe in free expression, but we believe, well, but the but is exactly where they can shove their commitment to free speech because it's non-existent when they put it with all these different caveats. And even from Rambacana, Nathan Rambacana was getting a fair bit of a thrashing on Twitter when this whole thing happened. People saying, you know, you're a fascist, you're a Nazi, you're a Marxist, whatever. And look, a lot of it was incredibly excessive, not appropriate. Despite what he did, there was a lot of really nasty comments that came at him. And when he published that apology, I really hoped that he had learned that, yes, he overstepped and perhaps his own worldview had gotten in the way of what was supposed to be, when he became a professor, a commitment to education. But the fact that he and his colleague, Herbert Pimlott, are relitigating this suggests not only that they didn't learn anything from the initial ordeal, but it also suggests that they don't even understand what was at stake when this whole thing happened. That you can't just slander someone because you disagree with their perspectives and get away with it, because we don't know how often the Jordan Peterson as Hitler comparison was seeping into the classroom. We just don't. And if they were saying it so matter-of-factly in a meeting with a student who dared to show a video clip of them, it suggests to me that this is probably a pretty commonplace staple in their worldview and in their classrooms. Not necessarily about Peterson, but about conservatives in general, about the idea of free speech in general. There's no excuse in 2017 when this happened to have not already thought about the role that free speech plays in a university. So I don't buy into the idea that the school had never really thought of it before the Lindsay Shepherd thing happened. If they did, that speaks volumes that the school was never really that committed to free speech and to the principles of free speech. So I'm really interested in where the legal side of this is going to go, because as far as the academic side, it was supposed to be done. Laurier apologized, said it was wrong. Nathan Rambacana apologized, said he was wrong. Lindsay Shepherd's now graduated. She's suing, of course, as is Jordan Peterson. But this further action by the professors, which is something that goes so far beyond them defending themselves. It's not them filing a statement of defense. It's them saying that Lindsay Shepherd is the perpetrator here. And that's the worst part of this. It's one thing to say, no, nothing legally bad happened. Nothing happened for which we should be legally liable. It's them saying that Lindsay Shepherd is the one who started this all, even though we apologize for the meeting, because they think that they should be able to say whatever they want in a closed-door inquisition without having to pay for it, literally or figuratively. The only reason that Lindsay has become the iconic figure in the free speech fight that she has is because she recorded this, because she did something that made it so this could not just be she said, he said, they said, Z said, Zim said, whatever the pronouns at Laurier are. But this is the whole point here, is that she actually had the proof. And even people who are not in this deeply immersed world of free speech fights like I am. Like, I live for this stuff. I've been following this since 2010 when people didn't even know there was a free speech fight. But she did this in a way that got most normal people to listen and be like, well, hang on, this just is not right. And why she was such and is such a compelling figure here is because Lindsay herself was not a free speech fighter. She was not someone who had ever really thought of this issue. And I've interviewed her about this in the past. She was a left-winger. She was pro-transgender pronouns, pro-climate change, pro-choice, pro all of these things that the liberal Marxist professors would have agreed with her on. But she came by it honestly, and they didn't. She came by her views out of a belief that we need to be able to talk about these things openly. They came by their beliefs from the perspective of no one should be able to have any other beliefs. And this is something that liberal professors are doing with increasing frequency right now, to not just advance a position, but to advance a position by it being the last position remaining, because we're going to get rid of all the other ones. So it's not that we want our Marxist worldview that involves censorship and authoritarianism in the classroom to be the best, and we're going to argue why. It's we don't want there to be any other position. And the lawsuit filing, if you will, the third-party claim, the lawsuit within a lawsuit, I haven't seen the claim yet. And I was told in a story that I read, the Canadian Press wrote that Lindsay Shepherd's lawyer has not yet seen it. He just knows that it's been filed. And, you know, there is a huge possibility here that this case will go on and on and on. And it proves with every step that the people that most needed to take something away from this saga have not done that. And that's Pimlott and Rambacana and Joel and Laurier University itself. And the timing of this is interesting. I'm going to have a video about this later in the week, I think, that as of January 1st, all public universities in Ontario, including Laurier, have to have a free speech policy on campus. They have to have a policy that proves they are committed to upholding the values of free speech, free thought, academic freedom, and all of that. And this came about because of Doug Ford, the new Premier of Ontario, introduced the policy that says if schools don't do it, the province may pull their funding. And it shouldn't have had to come this far. This shouldn't need to be in the courtroom right now, because it shouldn't be happening in the first place, that this inquisition took place and put Lindsay Shepherd in the position that she had to be in. And that's really a big part of this right now, that Lindsay was in a position where she said, look, I've been wronged, I need to sue. That's her rationale. Jordan Peterson, I have questions about whether the case is a viable one. I don't know what it is, because generally speaking, you have to prove damages in any defamation case. I don't know if he was damaged by this. I think that it was mean. I think it was slanderous. I think it was dishonest what the people said. I don't know if it's something that can be litigated. But had they just defended by saying, look, this is a nonsense case, we didn't defame Jordan Peterson. We made comments that were in the context of academic inquiry. We, probably should have used different words, but, really he didn't suffer from this. I would have a lot more respect for their defense than them trying to say, okay, nothing happened that was bad. He wasn't defamed. He didn't suffer. But, on second thought, look at that Lindsay Shepherd girl over there. We think she bears the responsibility because she published these words. Well, yeah, but they're your words. They're your words. You said these things. She was a whistleblower. She was a whistle. I mean, that's like saying if I quoted someone, like if I go over to, John Smith over on Elm Street says, Justin Trudeau eats kittens. And I say out loud, John Smith says Justin Trudeau eats kittens. I don't agree with John Smith, but I want everyone to know this is what John Smith is saying. Justin Trudeau cannot come to me and say, well, you said I eat kittens. No, I didn't. I'm reflecting. I'm actually calling out someone else who thinks that. So Lindsay Shepherd has done the world a service here by exposing this worldview that exists in campus. And, one of the words that, or phrases rather, that came out of this claim that was in the media report of it in the Canadian press is that Shepherd was exercising power and control over the situation because she had the recording. So she was the one that was the powerful controlling figure here. And I find that so laughable. This little, mild-mannered 21, 22-year-old student, teaching assistant in a room with 3 academic officials being told that she was no different than anyone who quoted Hitler. And they're saying she had power and control over them. Now, she did have control over her own situation, but fighting back is never an act of aggression. Fighting back is how you meet aggression. And again, I go back to what is the most fundamental point here, that they were the ones who aggressed against her. They were the ones who started this. She finished it. They brought her into this. She defended herself. And for them to now say that this is all her fault is despicable. It is absolutely despicable. And I don't know what's going to happen with the case. I really don't. I would like to believe that a judge will just throw it out and say, look, come on, this is just completely nonsensical. I don't know if a lawsuit within a lawsuit, which is what this is, a third-party claim, can be thrown out as a SLAP, which is a strategic lawsuit against public participation. I don't know if that's an option available to Lindsay Shepherd and her lawyer, Howard Levitt. I don't know what's going to happen with Peterson's lawsuit and with Lindsay's lawsuit. I mean, this is all stuff that stands to be seen. I'm focusing on the bigger narrative here that seems to have driven to this happening in the first place. And that is that the professors who you'd most think would be positioned right now to take a step back and say, yes, we overstepped our bounds, are doubling down, tripling down, quadrupling down, and still not accepting any responsibility for what they had the gall and the audacity to do just 14 months ago, November of 2017. Now, a lot's changed. A lot has changed in the free speech realm in the last couple of years. Remember, it's only been in the last couple of years that Jordan Peterson has become a household name, that Lindsay Shepherd's become a household name, that universities now have a mechanism by which they're expected to uphold free speech. This is all happening very recently, but the undercurrent that's been leading to this has been going on since the 1980s. I remember writing a 30th anniversary column about Alan Bloom's book, The Closing of the American Mind. If you haven't read the book, came out, I think 32 years ago now, or 31 years ago. Simply incredible read. From a professor before political correctness was the word that we know, that we all know, and that we all revile. And he was writing about this undercurrent of entitlement that was taking place on campuses. Students that were starting to feel like they had a little bit too much or didn't have enough power as to what is taught in the classroom. And he was saying that, professors, need to be on guard about this. But it's amazing how this has flipped now, where the concern then was that these Marxist students are trying to throw the curriculum out. Well, now those Marxist students of 1987 are the professors of 2019. So the people that Alan Bloom warned us about were the Nathan Rambuccanas and Herbert Pimlots when they were students, who are now professors. Because everyone who couldn't deal with that in the 80s, they left. They left academia, they went into other sectors, and I don't really blame them. And the ones who remained were the ones that were drinking this Kool-Aid, the ones that are now suing a young woman who just graduated with a master's, who's trying to get a foothold in a career and finds that she can't because of what happened to her at Laurier, because of the way that Laurier treated her. And where people need to take some perspective here is that even though she was the one that made the decision to go public with this, she was going public because it was her only way to remedy the situation. So she created the discussion about it, but she didn't create the situation itself. And that's a distinction that's a significant one. And it's one that's lost on the professors, it's one that's lost on Laurier, and it's one that's lost on a lot of the people that are calling Lindsay Shepherd all sorts of names and have been relentlessly for the last year and a bit, because they clearly don't get what the stakes are of this. And, I've got my own issues with judicial activism, so many so that a lot of what's going to happen with this case will not depend on what the law says, but will depend on which judge it is that takes it over. And that's a big issue right there that, we don't even have time to get into in this particular True North report. But what we can do is talk about the climate, because that's what we really need to fix moving forward. The climate that led to professors thinking this was a good idea, because all of the legal messiness that's come from this would have been avoided if the situation itself didn't happen. So beyond the legal stuff, we have to make sure that the next Lindsay Shepherd doesn't exist, and that the next Laurier University witch trial doesn't exist. And I'm hopeful that schools having to have these free speech policies will at least get the issue addressed. But we also haven't seen the revolting against this. I know student unions have tried to say that they don't think this is a fair thing. There are going to be court challenges over this. Whether student unions are exempt from policies or not, we still don't know. So there are a lot of question marks about this, and really how seriously will the government enforce it? Are they actually going to cut funding, or are they just going to go now? Like if I was Doug Ford, I'd be like really going in with a giant bandsaw and looking at their budgets and saying, no free speech. All right, we're cutting this whole thing. I don't know if he's going to do that. I don't know if he's just going to cut off public universities because they don't uphold free speech. But I can tell you that if they start to have the necessary fear put into them that their funding is cut, it's amazing how quickly they'll change their tune on whether they support free speech. And that's the whole thing, is that these ideologues are surprisingly weak-willed, because when they actually have skin in the game, they aren't prepared to stand by their principles. And we're seeing this with Rambuccana and Pimlott. When the you-know-what hits the fan, they're not prepared to stand their ground. They're passing the buck, saying it was someone else's fault entirely. And they almost got away with it. Now, we do have to wrap things up in just a moment here, but I wanted to, on a more personal note, if you're tuning in, stay with me. And if you're watching this later, well, you're watching it anyway, so hi. Talk about how we're going to fight this, because in 2019, as I mentioned, we've got a policy change in Ontario that I think will really put things on a better track. But it's just one province, and more importantly, we don't yet know the impact. So what we're really trying to do here is a two-pronged approach. We have to deal with the cultural aspect of this. We also have to deal with the legal aspect of it. And I'm pledging in 2019 to do both. And this is something that really a tiny number of groups and individuals are doing, so tiny that I can't even think of any right now, that are making the commitment that I am right now. But I can't do it without you. And what I'd like you to do, please, is head on over to truenorthinitiative.com and consider making a contribution. Or if you really want to be in on the ground level of this, join one of my clubs. Now, you can do this for really $10 a month. You can do it for more if you'd like. We'd love for you to do it. for as much as you're able to. But join my club. We've got some perks on there that we'll certainly tell you about on the website. But more importantly, it's about getting into this fight when it matters. We can't do this alone. We don't get part of the $600 million that Justin Trudeau is giving his journalism friends. We don't have that infrastructure. We don't have the war chest that labor unions do when it comes to elections. We only get to do this stuff when you support us. So please do, if you want to get more involved and see this action come to fruition in 2019, please do join my club. I'll post a link in the Facebook chat over there in just a moment. But thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week, and stay tuned for the rest of the week when we'll have lots more videos on this and other subjects at the True North Initiative. Thank you. God bless, and good day, Canada.